Thank you, Miranda. Good morning and welcome to First Parish in Concord on this first Sunday of 2022. May I wish you hope and health and happiness in this coming year. I'm so glad you have joined us today. We welcome you whether you are here with us in person or if you are joining us online on Zoom or on YouTube later on. We're delighted that you have decided to spend this hour or so with us as we begin a new year. This morning, I'm delighted to welcome the Reverend Mary Margaret Earle, who is Senior Minister and Executive Director of the UU Urban Ministry, as our preacher. It'll be wonderful to hear from her at the beginning of the year. I'm also happy to welcome Miranda Loud, who is our guest organist for the month of February, while Eric is taking a summer break in the winter. Not a bad idea. Jan Power is our Zoom chat host today. If you are on Zoom and you have questions, Jan is there for you, and thank you, Jan, for being our chat host. If you need hearing assistance, we have headphones in the back that can be obtained from an usher. Our elevator is through the doors right back here, and it takes you to any level of the building, and all of our restrooms have accessible stalls. We are really glad that you are here with us this morning, and we are grateful to all for taking care in this community. To keep us all safer, masks must be worn inside the building, and also please social distance. All our worship leaders, choir, and teachers are vaccinated, and we strongly encourage vaccination for everyone who is medically able, as this is how we take care of ourselves and one another and our wider community. The choir will sing one anthem, and the congregation, we get to sing together the closing hymn, and we encourage those of you on Zoom to sing along. We are keeping the windows open to improve our ventilation, so please don't close the windows and just bundle up. We would like to remind you to stay at home if you're not feeling well, even if you think it's just a cold. And if you or a family member tests positive for COVID, please call or email a member of the church staff. As always, if there's been a COVID exposure here at church, we will let the congregation know while preserving the anonymity of the person. And together, we covenant to reduce the risk of COVID by each doing our part. Thank you for being here. It's great to be with you this morning.
We arrive in a new day, in a new year, still enveloped in challenge and scattered by particles that morph and evade and have not yet given way. We arrive not in the clearing that we had hoped for. We wander still in the desert when we'd expected this season to emerge in a new and better land, a new and better time. And so, this is the season of a deeper faith. This is the season of a stronger will. This is the season of stubborn perseverance. We arrive. We arrive in the moment that we have been given. We arrive here in person in the sanctuary or by our attention and our spirit. We come with creative minds that are ever churning with new solutions and new opportunities and new ways. We come standing on the shoulders of ancestors who journeyed through the wilderness of struggle and struggle and struggle and at last emerged. We come with hearts set on love and justice, hearts that bring us into community despite whatever difficulties we face, hearts that pull us together to build a better world in the midst of what is, that call us to be truly people of faith. We arrive with deep in the bones wisdom. Listen, feel. We know this. We are sufficient for this day, for this year, for this time. We have what we need to persevere and to thrive. We have what we need to do good work still and to nurture and give birth to beauty, no matter what is before us, no matter what this new year brings. We are sufficient. You are sufficient. This is the good news of a new year. Come, let us praise this day. Come, let us worship together. I invite you to join with me in our chalice lighting response, which is printed in your order of service. O flame of our faith, open our hearts and fill our bodies and souls with persistent strength. Enliven our spirits and engage us deeply in this life of ours, this sacred, essential moment now. And now we enter together into centering music. now is the time for our responsive reading, which is number 568 in your hymnal or on the slide if you are here by Zoom. I will begin reading the first line, and you're invited to read in response the parts in italics. Connections are made slowly. Connections are made slowly. Sometimes they grow underground.
You cannot tell always by looking what is happening.
More than half a tree is spread out in the soil under your feet.
Penetrate quietly as the earthworm that blows no trumpet.
Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree.
Spread like the squash plant that overruns the garden.
Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar.
Weave real connections, create real nodes, build real houses.
Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving.
Keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in, a thicket and bramble wilderness to the outside, but to us, interconnected with rabbit runs and burrows and lairs.
Live as if you like yourself, and it may happen.
Reach out, keep reaching out, keep bringing in.
This is how we are going to live for a long time, not always.
For every gardener knows that after the digging, after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes.
And our reading is from The Power of Proximity by Brian Stevenson. To make a difference in creating a healthier community, a healthier society, a healthier nation, we've got to find a way to get proximate to the poor and to the vulnerable. I absolutely believe that when we isolate ourselves, when we allow ourselves to be shielded and disconnected from those who are vulnerable and disfavored, we sustain and contribute to these problems. I am persuaded that in proximity, there is something we can learn about how we change the world. And so ends our reading. Good morning. It is good to be here in Concord again in this new year. I am grateful to my good colleague, the Reverend Howard Dana, for arranging for me to be here this morning. It is good to be here in this beautiful sanctuary, and while I know many of you are connected from home, your presence shines here too in this sacred space with us. First Parish Concord and so many Concordians have been good friends of the urban ministry, and so it feels good to be here this morning to say thank you, and to begin with thank you. Thank you for all the ways that we have connected through the years. Thank you for sponsoring our community conversation webinar last month on closing the racial wealth gap. Thank you for your recent gift card drive to benefit participants in our workforce and shelter programs. I'm grateful to the work of Loretta Ho-Scherblum and the Funderburg Scholars over time. That program provides graduates of our Urban Ministry After School program with important college support. I want to thank the congregants here who serve as delegates to the urban ministry. Rebecca Winborn, Gib Metcalf, and Leslie Fisher. They're the people who will represent First Parish Concord at our urban ministry annual meeting, and they're conduits for communication back and forth from the urban ministry and First Parish. And they've already been wonderful connectors and champions of our work. There are members here who've been faithful friends and supporters in so many ways, through financial support, social justice support, cheering our work on. Tony Rodriguez and Janet Donovan, Alec Walker and Caitlin Selly, Ed Kane and Marty Wallace, new friends like Ted Bain and Leah Delacour. And we have longtime and deeply faithful friends like music director Beth Norton, who has been a cheerful and bright light through many years at the Urban Ministry, especially being a champion of our historic meeting house restoration, which we are transforming into an event venue to serve Roxbury and lift up the artists of Roxbury. And so it is good to be here leading worship with Beth this morning. So I wanted to begin this morning with a story, and it is a story of the exact moment when I knew that I had been shaped by racism. I was 18 years old and in college and playing soccer field in a gym class my first semester, and I tore down the field with drive and purpose, and I kicked the ball hard toward the goal, right into the shins of an opposing player. And my fierceness turned in a flash into fear, not because I had hit the shins of a player, that was common, but because my opponent, who is also a college student, was Black. I skidded to a stop, apologized profusely, my drive evaporating into thin air, and she, who I did not know at all, she, the most soft-spoken of young women, said, "Oh, it's fine, don't worry, it's fine." And it was that split second of fear colliding with gentleness, the upending of my reaction by her soft kindness that jogged loose what I had not seen in myself and was then forced to see. My reaction was racist. I feared her and her response because she was Black. I'd been shaped by racism, and I didn't know how that had happened. I grew up in an overwhelmingly white farming town in upstate New York. My sports teams were all white, my 4-H club white, my friends, my neighbors. I didn't really see Black people, and I thought racism had been settled in the 60s. So how had it happened, this fear? The gift of that confusing moment was that I glimpsed that I had absorbed racism without knowing it. We are shaped by stories and untruths rendered invisible, and by a history that has been covered over. Our biases form through a million images in the movies and TV, like the gradual building up of a drip sandcastle, one small handful of sand at a time. These shape our inner landscape. Our outer landscape has been shaped by racism too, by policies paired with bias. Courts and schools, the towns we live in, where we live, and who does not live there. Despite all of it, for white people, it's easy not to see it and to ignore it. And so the question is, what is asked of us then as people of faith? How do we bring into focus something that is so easily blurred? In 2021, the Urban Ministry embraced a new mission statement, which calls us to work across race and place to dismantle racism and white supremacy culture, and to advance racial, social, and economic justice. It's a call that inspires, but it's also daunting. How do we do that? So for those of you who are less familiar to the Urban Ministry, we are a 190-year-old organization now based in Roxbury, which is the historic heart of Boston's Black community. We're grounded in our UU faith values and encircled by UU member congregations like Concord, mostly white and suburban. We've done many things through our history, and today we provide programs for trauma survivors, after-school programming for high school students, and cultural engagement in the Roxbury neighborhood we serve. We embark now on a mission that will call us to do more to directly confront the racism that means the average Roxbury resident lives 30 years less than a resident of Whiteback Bay just 1 mile away. That means that Black college students leave before graduation at much higher rates than white counterparts. That means that the household wealth of white Bostonian far outstrips that of Black families in Boston. Our new mission statement will call for new strategies and programs to confront that legacy. And it will take a deeper commitment from our member congregations. So I'm here this morning to ask for your help to live into that mission. It will take all of us, and all of us, our head, our hands, and our hearts to do this work. Our heads help us to learn about the history of race in the United States. The African-American author James Baldwin said this: "History, as nearly no one seems to know, is not merely something to be read, and it does not refer merely or even principally to the past. On the contrary, the great force of history comes from the fact that we carry it within us, are unconsciously controlled by it in many ways, and history is literally present in all that we do." End quote. We are called to learn that history. The African-American attorney and activist Bryan Stevenson, graduate of Harvard, tells the story of sitting in a courtroom as a defense attorney. He wrote, "The judge and the prosecutor entered through a door in the back of the courtroom, laughing and chatting. When the judge saw me sitting at the defense table, he said to me harshly, 'Hey, you shouldn't be here without counsel. Go back outside and wait in the hallway until your lawyer arrives.' I stood up and smiled broadly and said, 'Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor, we haven't met. My name is Bryan Stevenson. I'm the lawyer on the case set for hearing this morning.' The judge laughed at his mistake, and the prosecutor joined in. I forced myself to laugh because I didn't want my young client, a white child who'd been prosecuted as an adult, to be disadvantaged. But I was disheartened by the experience," he wrote. Of course, innocent mistakes occur, but constantly being underestimated, suspected, accused, watched, doubted, distrusted, presumed guilty, and even feared is a burden borne by people of color that can't be understood or confronted without a deeper conversation about our history of racial justice," he wrote. The prison system, the wealth gap, the health gap, the reaction that I had to my classmate on the soccer field can be understood only by examining our history, by becoming conscious of the legacy we have inherited that began with the arrival of the first kidnapped Africans on these shores, by reading articles like the New York Times 1619 Project, or books like The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. We need our heads for this work. But anyone frustrated by the umpteenth book club about white fragility knows that we also need to work for change. We need action. There are abundant ways. At the Urban Ministry, we address the racial wealth gap by highlighting Black-owned businesses in Roxbury. We make commercials about them, posting them on our community conversations webinars, and we encourage our UU congregations to support them. We launched the Roxbury Artist Amplification Project, showcasing artists of colors by video galleries and a catalog of their work. We connect UUs from member congregations with partner organizations fighting for racial justice, resisting displacement caused by gentrification, working for environmental justice in communities of color, and for educational equity. We need our hands. We need action. But even that isn't enough. We also need our hearts to be in this. We need relationships across difference because relationships are the catalyst for real change. An awakened heart stays the course. 2.5 years ago, More than 2.5 years ago, police killed an unarmed black man named George Floyd, and it was a death that reignited the Black Lives Matter movement across the world. UU congregations like this one gathered in the midst of the COVID shutdown to march and demand change. The flames of that movement continue to burn for justice, but we need to ensure that they do not dim. And it is relationships, our hearts, that ensure that. Love makes us steadfast. Love holds us accountable. Love gives us the courage to do hard things. The African American minister and historian, the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed, in one of his sermons tells how the white clergy came to join Martin Luther King in Selma more than 50 years ago. UUs like the Reverend James Reeb, Orloff Miller, Clark Olson, and Jack Kent. These individuals, Morrison Reed writes, came to Selma not because of what they knew about segregation. It was because of the relationships they had. Reverend James Reeb, who was killed by white supremacists during his visit, lived in Dorchester, where his children attended black public schools and where he was immersed in the grassroots empowerment of his African American neighbors. He knew black people. Morrison Reed writes, "Today we assume that the outpouring of support and the rush to Selma was because of the righteousness of the cause and the magnitude of the injustice, but that doesn't fully explain the response. Of course it was because of the cause, but it was relationships that compelled them to go, the connection of one person to another," he wrote. And here is our problem. Few places are harder to make a connection across race than Greater Boston. According to the Boston Magazine article, How Has Boston Gotten Away with Being So Segregated for So Long?, of 51 metro areas with significant African American populations, we are the 15th most segregated. 2/3 of Boston's black population lives in Roxbury, Dorchester, and Mattapan, and hardly any black people live in the suburbs. That's by design. The article spells out in excruciating detail all the systems that for the past 100 years have ensured home ownership and therefore wealth creation was kept out of the hands of black people, and how these systems created a chasm between white people and black people and prevented us from knowing one another, even in 2022. Segregation may not be the law of the land in Greater Boston, but look around and it's the fact of Greater Boston. Over the past century, covenant restrictions and subdivisions and redlining and racist FHA policies and racist HUD policies kept black people out of certain Boston neighborhoods and absolutely out of the suburbs. Here are some examples from the article. In the early 1900s, the first subdivision in Brookline included a racially restrictive covenant, which meant basically that homes couldn't be sold to black people. Eventually, the National Association of Real Estate Boards, whose code of ethics discouraged members from introducing black people into white neighborhoods, drafted model covenants like Brookline's and encouraged homeowners associations to adopt them. The FHA was formed in the 1930s, and between 1934 and 1962 spent $120 billion on home loans, 98% of which were to white families. These loans were the driver of the exodus from Boston to the suburbs for white people. Quote, "Because the FHA believed that property values would diminish if black people moved into neighborhoods, its underwriting manual provided a guideline stating that properties shall continue to be occupied by the same social and racial classes. The agency routinely declined to ensure developments that weren't exclusively white, end quote. By 1970, Boston suburbs, except Cambridge, were 98% white. Meanwhile, as white families moved to the suburbs, black families migrated from the South to Boston and found that the only places they could live were places like Roxbury, a neighborhood where the banks would not make home improvement loans, where the housing was older, and which were ripe picking for slumlords. One Brown University researcher was quoted saying, "So the concept of a black neighborhood as a bad neighborhood comes right out of this process," end quote. And we have the story of the bad neighborhood of Roxbury. Brian Stevenson says to make real change, privileged people need to get proximate to those who are not privileged. And I quote him again. To make a difference in creating a healthier community, a healthier society, a healthier nation, we've got to find a way to get proximate to the poor and the vulnerable. I absolutely believe, he wrote, that when we isolate ourselves, when we allow ourselves to be shielded and disconnected from those who are vulnerable and disfavored, we sustain and contribute to these problems. I am persuaded, he wrote, that in proximity there is something we can learn about how we change the world, end quote. The fact of our segregation in Greater Boston makes it hard to do. And when we are not proximate, when we do not personally feel connected to those being disproportionately arrested, incarcerated, killed in police incidents, when we are not connected to the neighborhoods suffering environmental pollution or displacement by gentrification, let's be honest, it is easy to set it all aside, to put this movement ignited by the death of George Floyd back on the shelf, to reduce it to a fading bumper sticker or lawn sign. And as a woman who's white, I am not immune. So here's what helps keep me going. I began with the story of my soccer field revelation, and I want to tell you another story about the gift of proximity. Before I became a minister, I was a newspaper reporter in upstate New York. And my cubicle neighbor in the features department was an African-American woman whose newsroom friends included 2 other African-American women. These colleagues gathered daily at the desk of my neighbor, chatting, joking, sharing stories that I got to hear and become part of. The dailiness built among us some knowing and some trust. I was then newly vegan and a new animal rights activist, and I was assigned a feature story that would mean posting and sharing a veal recipe. And after agonizing about it, I said no. My conscience wouldn't let me. My editors insisted, threatening to fire me, and my fate hung in the balance. And as I recall it, 25 years later, 3 people rallied around me, none of them vegan. They were these 3 African-American women, all young, without any real power in the newsroom hierarchy. But they offered to start a petition to defend me. They were willing to put themselves at risk to defend my right of conscience. In the sea of colleagues, most everyone else stepped back. The ones who stepped forward were these 3 women. They had no interest personally in animal rights, but they had every interest in standing up for the underdog. And unlike many of my white colleagues, apparently, they did not assume that those in power were right. I learned a lot from that time, and my friendships with these women endured long after I had left journalism for the ministry. I never forgot the gift of proximity of my seating arrangement. It's a gift that I continue to receive daily at the urban ministry. Most of our staff are people of color from the communities we serve. So are our program participants, so are our neighbors. I am gifted daily by proximity. At the urban ministry, we think a lot about how to build proximity between member congregations and our Roxbury neighborhood. Not proximity by charity, but how we create space for relationships that are built on listening, learning, trust, respect. And these are built over time and with intention. We are seeking not to come in and help Roxbury. We seek to learn from Roxbury, to build bridges between suburb and city so that together we can make real change. There's a quotation on the wall at the urban ministry when you first walk in by the Aboriginal activist Lila Watson, and it says this: "If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together." This guides us. We organize tours to Black businesses and historic tours of the neighborhood. We gather committees and task forces made of both UUs and our neighbors to shape our work. One recent day, I spent the morning in Roxbury at an event honoring the elders of our neighborhood who had protected and defended the community against racist neglect through the years. The urban ministry joined a coalition honoring them through a community portrait. I felt deep gratitude for the opportunity that I've had to come to know some of these elders, to listen to them, to build relationships with them. These relationships set my heart on justice for the long haul. Every day, we seek ways to introduce, to knit together, to overcome the ways the world has divided us, so that we can forge relationships that will help us to make the change that we seek. There's no magic wand for this work, for this relationship building. It's just time, intention, trying again and trying again, showing up, listening, learning, listening more. And so my invitation is this: join our work, come visit us, schedule a tour of our outdoor space, join our mailing list, reach out for a conversation with our engagement team, join us in building bridges and tearing down the barriers to justice, to join me in this New Year's resolution, to resolve to keep our work for justice real, to keep the fires for justice burning, burning, and burning brightly. Amen, and may it be so. And this is the time when you are invited to, I'm going to get the question. You are invited to join in groups if you feel comfortable, or to sit quietly by yourself and reflect if you're more comfortable doing that, to consider the reflection question. When did I become aware of how I'd been shaped by racism that is a part of our culture and our history? And how do I feel called to make change? And we'll spend just a little while on that discussion or reflection.
open my heart. Open our hearts, one of the things that Mary Margaret just called us to do. This chant that the choir is about to share, it was written by Ana Hernandez, who describes herself as a composer, arranger, author, and mischief maker, and she is. She set these words, "Open my heart," to a tune that's based on a Buddhist compassion mantra in the Chinese Buddhist tradition. You'll hear that as we layer on. I invite you, whether you're at home or whether you're in the sanctuary, to let this chant open your heart. Hum along if you feel called to as we sing.
Now is the time in our service where we knit together and build up community through the sharing of those things that are in our hearts. Today we send our prayers and caring thoughts to Steve and Meg and to Paul. Steve and Meg H. lost Steve's mother, Elaine. She died on Christmas Day at age 93. We hold Steve, Meg, and their family in our hearts as they mourn Elaine's passing. Paul M.'s older brother, James, died on Monday, December 27th. James died peacefully with family at his side 18 months to the day after his beloved wife, Barbara. We hold Paul and all of James' family in our hearts as they grieve. And now I invite you to say aloud or to type into the chat the names of people that you would like to pray for, and we will hold that space for a moment as you do. And now I invite you to hum with Pam as she sings Spirit of Life.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea. Move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
I invite us now to enter into the time of prayer, to close our eyes if we would like, and settle into our pews and breathe in and become present to this moment. Loving and creative spirit that is always at work, moving in and among us and bringing beauty from disorder, comfort out of pain, solution out of struggle. We gather today distanced by space and illness, but not by spirit. We gather in community by intention, and we lift up all that is weighing on us. We lift up the challenge of entering a new year still carrying the weight of COVID and its illness and its worries. We lift up struggles in our families, with our children, in our marriages, with our work. We lift up all of our personal worries and hurts. And we lift up and celebrate healing, growth, wellness, community. We lift up gratitude for all the things through which we have persevered. We lift up and celebrate resilience, strength, will, courage. and we seek to find ways to keep tapping into our creative, resilient center, remembering daily that we have what we need to keep moving forward, to keep growing, to keep building up, to keep working for a better community and church and world. All of this we lift up in hope and in faith as we enter together into a time of silence.
Find the stillness, hold the stillness, let the stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find a true harmony.
I'd like to invite Leslie Fisher up to light our social action candle.
Good morning. As Beth said, I'm Leslie Fisher, and I nominated the Boston Ujima Project for Share the Plate this month. I've been aware of the project for several years, and I continue to be impressed by its scope, goals, and leadership. Ujima is a wide-ranging and ambitious project, and it can be hard to wrap your head around what they do and how they do it. Their overarching goal is to help Boston's working-class neighborhoods of color have greater investment in and control over what happens in their own community, unlike historically. Ujima's work starts with determining via neighborhood assemblies what resources Boston residents want in their communities. Resources such as employment opportunities, affordable real estate options, more retail and restaurant choices, and cultural connectivity. New and fledgling businesses that fulfill these needs present themselves for financing. Ujima staff vet the businesses and then bring them to membership for a vote to approve or decline funding. In addition to funding, Ujima supports businesses with technical assistance and a business alliance. There is also an activism component. Meanwhile, the funds have been raised from institutional grants and small and larger investors who earn a modest interest. Ujima's capital goal has been met, and Zero, a commercial composting company based in Dorchester, has succeeded with Ujima's support. COVID has unfortunately complicated their process for further business investments, but they are poised for a vote later in January on an investment request from the Dorchester Food Co-op. Our contributions this month will go toward operating expenses and/or the Imani Pool, a loan loss reserve fund that helps secure investments of their working and middle-class investors. The word Ujima is Swahili for collective work and responsibility. The vision and work belongs to these communities of color. We have the ability and perhaps even the responsibility to help support these neighborhoods as they guide their own development. The project's scope is broad and beyond what I've outlined today, and so I urge you to check out Ujima's website and sign up for their newsletter. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. And now is your opportunity to be able to support Ujima and also the ministry of First Parish in Concord, both here and in the wider world. We'll be collecting our offering. There will be plates coming around if you're here in the room, or you can text your offering. The amount to text, or the number to text to is in the order of service or will appear on the screen in a few minutes. If you have never done this before, you will need to put in a credit card the first time. But now let us receive our offering for the good work of this church and of Ujima. Thank you, Miranda. It's a musical reminder that we are still in the Christmas season, as is the crash. The Epiphany is January 6th. Thank you so much. As we come to the close of our service, a reminder that everything you need to know about what is happening at First Parish in Concord can be learned from FP Weekly. It will come to you by email. It's our weekly newsletter. If you are not receiving it, check your spam filter. And if you would like to receive it, you can do so through our website. So I encourage you to sign up for that. After the service, our worship sharing circle will be led by Dana and Jim Snyder Grant in the Bulkley room? Ripley room back on the second floor back here. That's a chance for you to talk in a smaller circle but still well-spaced about the service today, and I invite you to do that if you would like to go there. We have coffee hour outdoors directly after the service. I think that the coffee is on the Carister porch under wraps, and we encourage you to mask when you cannot distance when you are outside. Today our standing committee rep is Jim Reynolds. He's right here, and he'd be glad to greet you and answer any questions. I believe that's it for invitations, and now I'm going to invite Brendan to lead our closing hymn.
Good morning, everyone. Please join me in singing Come and Go With Me. No hymnals necessary for this. There's only a few words, so you can follow along with me as the words change on each voice. So please follow me. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound. There'll be freedom. Justice. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. There'll be justice in that land. Where I'm bound. There'll be singing. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. Where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. There'll be singing in that land. Where I'm bound. Come and go. Come and go with to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land where I'm bound.
Go out with faith. You are sufficient to meet the challenges of this day and this new year. Go out in faith and stubborn perseverance. Please join with me in our shared benediction. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. Amen.